Right now, you probably have toilet paper within arm's reach of wherever you go to the bathroom. You don't think about it. You don't plan for it. It's just there. But for the vast majority of human history, that simple roll of paper did not exist. Not the paper, not the roll, not even the concept of wiping the way you know it. So what did your ancestors actually do? The answer is stranger, messier, and more resourceful than you'd expect. Let's go back roughly 300,000 years to the earliest Homo sapiens living across Africa. There was no bathroom, there was no privacy the way you understand it, and there was absolutely no paper. So when nature called, early humans used whatever the environment gave them. Leaves, grass, moss, smooth stones, even snow in colder climates. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies that survived into the modern era, groups whose lifestyles closely mirror those ancient humans, have documented exactly this. Leaves were the most common choice worldwide, chosen specifically for softness and size. Broad-leafed plants were, in a very real sense, evolution's toilet paper, millions of years before anyone manufactured the real thing.
But here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't random. Early humans learned, likely through painful trial and error, which plants worked and which plants absolutely did not. Certain leaves caused irritation. Some caused rashes. Some, if you were extremely unlucky, caused far worse. Knowledge of which plants were safe became something passed down, generation to generation, the same way knowledge of which berries were edible was passed down. This wasn't ignorance. This was survival knowledge, refined over tens of thousands of years. Now, let's fast forward to some of the first organized civilizations, because this is where things get genuinely fascinating.
In ancient Rome, public latrines were a shared communal experience, which by modern standards sounds almost unthinkably intimate. Multiple people sitting side by side over a shared trench with running water flowing beneath. And in front of each seat sat a stick with a sea sponge attached to the end. This device is called a tersorium. After use, the sponge was rinsed in a channel of flowing water in front of the seats and left for the next person. Yes, the next person. Historians debate exactly how communal this practice truly was, whether each household had its own sponge stick brought from home, or whether public sponges were genuinely shared among strangers. But either way, the concept of a personal, disposable wiping tool was still centuries away. Seneca, the Roman philosopher, actually referenced the tersorium in his writings about a gladiator who used one to end his own life rather than face execution in the arena, which tells you something both about the tool's ubiquity and the era's brutal relationship with death.
Ancient Greece had its own solution, broken pieces of pottery called pissoi. Archaeologists have found ceramic fragments deliberately shaped and smoothed for this exact purpose. Some pieces even had messages scratched onto them, the name of a political rival, instance, adding a layer of petty satisfaction to a mundane necessity. Using pottery for this purpose was so specifically referenced that it appears in ancient Greek comedic plays, meaning it was common enough to be a recognizable joke to audiences at the time. In ancient China, by around the 6th century, wealthy households and Buddhist temples were among the first to experiment with paper for this exact purpose, making it one of the earliest known uses of paper as a hygiene tool anywhere in the world. But paper was expensive and labor-intensive to produce, so this remained a luxury reserved almost exclusively for the elite. Everyone else continued using what was available: bamboo, wood, corn cobs in later agricultural societies. Smooth stones remained common across many cultures well into more recent history.
In medieval Europe, wealthy households sometimes used wool or hemcloth, washed and reused. Sailors on ships famously used a frayed piece of old rope, dipped over the side of the ship to be cleaned by the ocean, then reused by the next sailor in line. It's worth pausing on that one for a moment. An entire ship's crew sharing a single piece of rope, dragged through the sea between uses. Commercial toilet paper, as you would recognize it, didn't appear until 1857, invented in the United States by a man named Joseph Gayeti.
It was marketed as a medicated product, aloe-infused paper sold in individual sheets, and initially it did not sell well at all. People were deeply accustomed to using newspaper, catalog pages, or corn cobs, all of which were essentially free, and saw little reason to pay for something they'd been getting for free their entire lives. It took decades and the invention of the perforated roll in the 1890s for toilet paper to become the default across most of the developed world.
There's one more detail worth knowing, because it explains something you might have noticed in certain parts of the world even today. In many regions across Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia, cultures developed a completely different solution entirely: water. Not paper, not leaves. Water, used by hand, typically the left hand specifically, which is why in many of these cultures, the left hand carries strong cultural associations with uncleanliness, and the right hand is reserved for eating and greeting. This wasn't primitive. Hygienists today will actually tell you that water is in many respects a more thorough method than dry paper alone, which is exactly why bidets remain standard bathroom fixtures across much of Europe, Japan, and South America to this day. What looks like an old-fashioned method from one cultural perspective is from another angle entirely the more advanced one. It's a reminder that advanced and primitive say more about the person judging than the practice itself.
So here's the actual answer to the question. Ancient humans absolutely did clean themselves. The idea that they simply didn't is a myth born from imagining our ancestors as somehow less resourceful, less intelligent, less concerned with basic hygiene than we are. In reality, the opposite is true. Every civilization independently developed sophisticated, culturally specific solutions using whatever materials their environment provided. Leaves, sponges, pottery, rope, snow. Each solution reflects a society solving the exact same universal problem with remarkable ingenuity, adapted precisely to their climate, their resources, and their available technology.
The thing that's easy to miss is this. Every single one of those solutions eventually got replaced, refined, or discarded as better options emerged. What you consider completely normal today, a soft, perforated, individually wrapped roll of paper, will almost certainly look primitive to whoever exists 300 years from now. They'll probably wonder how you managed with something so basic, the same way you're currently wondering how anyone survived with a sea sponge on a stick. Every generation thinks their solution is the final one. It never is. Someone is always quietly working on what comes next. So the next time you reach for that roll without thinking twice, remember what it took to get there. 300,000 years of leaves, stones, sponges, pottery, rope, and finally paper. All of it, every uncomfortable step, in pursuit of the same basic goal every human who has ever lived has shared with you completely.